Eurovision isn't just about the music. It's a massive, highly visible stage for national identity. And recently, Ireland's explosive, boundary-pushing performance became the center of a very intense international conversation. We're looking at this massive collision between traditional expectations and a wildly avant-garde theatrical showcase that literally sparked a fierce debate over how Ireland is perceived by the rest of the world. So let's dig into exactly what happened, the arguments on both sides, and what this all actually means for cultural influence going forward.
Which brings us to the big question. Did Ireland damage its reputation at Eurovision? Now, in this explainer, we absolutely aren't here to take a side. Instead, we're going to unpack the reported diplomatic fallout, the starkly divided audience reactions, and the raw facts. We want to understand how a single, highly polarizing cultural moment triggered such a massive global debate about a nation's image. To unpack all this, here's our agenda. We'll look at 1. Ireland's historical Eurovision legacy. 2. Understanding international soft power. 3. Arguments for reputational damage. 4. Arguments against reputational damage. And finally, 5. Future impacts and final assessment. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Ireland's historical Eurovision legacy.
You see, the current controversy doesn't just exist in a vacuum, right? It's a massive departure from decades of established expectations. Think back to past eras. Ireland really built a legacy as the undisputed champion of the competition. They were defined by these universally beloved traditional ballads and record-breaking wins. Think artists like Johnny Logan. That was the established, incredibly safe national brand. Then, moving into recent years, there was a distinct shift. The competition evolved, and Ireland often struggled to qualify, kind of searching for a new identity on that stage. And that brings us to this year. Boom, a completely radical shift. We saw a dark, cinematic, totally genre-defying performance that completely shattered the traditional mold. To really understand the backlash and the praise, you have to realize just how violently this performance contrasted with the acoustic guitars and soft melodies of Ireland's past.
Moving on to Section 2, Understanding International Soft Power.
Before we examine the controversy itself, we really have to grasp what reputation actually means internationally. Think of soft power kind of like being the most popular kid in school, rather than the kid who can just beat everyone else up. It's not about military might or economic sanctions, no. It's the ability of a nation to shape its international reputation and attract or influence others through sheer cultural appeal. When a country participates in a massive broadcast reaching over 160 million people, they are actively projecting their identity. It's a direct exercise in cultural diplomacy. So, the debate here really hinges on whether Ireland's shocking use of this soft power was a strategic misstep that alienated allies or a bold evolution that captured a whole new generation.
And wow, does the debate split perfectly down the middle. On one side, critics argue that Ireland's international reputation was actively fractured, pointing to alienated traditional viewers and some serious diplomatic headaches. But on the exact opposite side, supporters contend the reputation wasn't damaged at all. In fact, they say it was modernized, protected against irrelevance, and successfully rebranded for the 21st century. So let's break down the evidence, starting with the critics.
That brings us to Section 3, Arguments for Reputational Damage. Critics point directly to conservative media reactions outside Ireland as clear evidence of a negative reputational shift. Broadcasters and journalists in several European nations reacted with, frankly, outright confusion and pearl-clutching. Some commentators aggressively labeled the dark, theatrical performance as too extreme or even satanic. Now, in the realm of soft power, international media commentary is a real-time gauge of cultural appeal. When millions of viewers who expect lighthearted pop are suddenly confronted with something genuinely avant-garde and polarizing, while critics see this as a measurable loss of universal goodwill. It's a perceived disconnect between the nation's traditionally friendly projected identity and the broader international audience's comfort zone.
But the arguments for damage go way deeper than just television commentary. There are tangible diplomatic implications here. Controversies on the global stage regularly spill over into formal diplomatic channels. Diplomats and government officials rely heavily on a generally positive, unified, and approachable national brand. Think the charming land of saints and scholars, to conduct international business, attract tourism, and negotiate trade. When a cultural performance sparks fierce political friction or intense cultural pushback abroad, it creates awkward hurdles. Suddenly, ambassadors are fielding questions about a pop culture shockwave rather than focusing on actual geopolitical strategy. For the critics, this friction represents a very real, unnecessary cost to the nation's soft power.
Now, let's flip the script and look at Section 4, Arguments Against Reputational Damage.
While official diplomatic channels might react to controversy with some apprehension, actual grassroots audience perceptions often tell a wildly different story. Pushing boundaries can actively increase a country's cultural relevance. While traditionalists or officials might wince at the dark aesthetics and the unapologetic breaking of norms, younger, more diverse international audiences viewed the performance as daring, fiercely authentic, and undeniably modern. In a competition historically saturated with safe, forgettable pop, generating massive engagement and viral conversation is a huge victory. From this perspective, shifting away from the historical legacy isn't reputational damage at all. It's actually a desperately needed update. It proves the country is progressive, artistically fearless, and fully capable of commanding the global spotlight in a highly competitive new era.
Which leads us nicely into Section 5, Future Impacts and Final Assessment. This entire debate brings us to a crucial fork in the road for cultural influence going forward. Because look, international reputation isn't a static monument, right? It is highly subjective and constantly in flux. The lasting legacy of this event will depend entirely on Ireland's next move. Do they look at the diplomatic friction and retreat back to their established historical legacy of safe, universally agreeable ballads? Or do they lean into this new, provocative direction, embracing the fact that polarizing art commands attention? This moment forces a fundamental reevaluation of what actually constitutes success on the global stage. Is it universal quiet approval, or is it generating the loudest, most passionate conversation in the world?
So when the dust finally settles on this intense debate, will this shift change how nations compete next year? Will other countries look at this controversy as a cautionary tale to strictly avoid, or as a brilliant blueprint for capturing the world's attention? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning how the media we consume shapes the world we live in.